We've spoken before about creating character, but in this video we're going to really focus on setting the scene, of which granted is a very filmmaker-y, storyteller kind of term, but as we're painting models, typically of characters, the bases that they're standing on should kind of reflect the story that you're trying to tell for the character that's standing on it. So in this video we're going to focus on that, and yes indeed this does very much look at the process of basing, of which is a thing that I'm really trying to work on as a miniature painter. It's always the last thing I typically think of, because once I've glued that model on that stand, that's it, time to paint. There's no going back. And in a couple of instances I've kind of regretted it, because I feel like, wow, I've painted this really cool model, but it's on such a boring base that doesn't influence the character that I've just painted. Now granted, some models come on very small bases, and if you're painting a massive army, then you're not going to want to do anything overly exuberant with a horde type army, because that's just going to slightly slow down your mini painting process, depending on your mileage. But if you've got a special character, something big, quite chunky, or if it's a model that you just personally think looks really cool and you want to do something quite special for it, like I did with this chunky fire giant by Reaper Miniatures, of which is the subject of this video, then it's worth putting that model together, having the base in hand, having them separate entities and treating them as such. And then once you've built your base, thought about how you're going to paint it, likewise thought about your model and how you're going to paint that, then you can commit to gluing and bringing it all together through the process of painting. And assembly as well, because you can put things in the assembly process to complement the base and the model itself, you know, in unison. And when we're doing this, it's certainly worth thinking about, is this actually complementing or is this over encumbering? So I wanted my fire giant to look like he's in mid-battle, under attack from a horde of skeletons. I also use these barrels as battlefield clutter that this skeleton arch has perched himself on. It would be so easy to stick a ton of these dudes on this guy, but I tried to apply these liberally, and in places that made sense, as to not confuse the viewer or spoil the overall composition of the model. It's worth taking into consideration things that you would with photography, framing things, because you don't want to have something that's completely cluttered and have the viewer confused as to what they're actually supposed to be looking at. Likewise for you who's actually going to paint the thing, so just looking out for you there. Finally, I use Sterling Bud texture paint to tie everything together. I primed the miniature in a Baden Black and used white scar to dry brush all over the model to create a zenithal highlight. I then applied a couple burnt grass tufts to the base of the miniature, and once these had dried, patchily applied some Valhalla Blizzard over parts of the base, just to give the impression of snow that's been trampled on, melted and smushed under footfall from the ensuing battle that's taking place here. The application of this was fairly liberal because I wanted the mud of the ground to still come through. I then used some snow Tamiya weathering powder. I focused this on the lower half of the model, just to further establish and tie in this model is standing in snow. So with the base rim done, let's look at the final product.